You've tuned in to part 3 of Business Lessons from the Godfather on the Let Me Speak to a Manager podcast. If you've not listened to episodes 1 and 2 of this series, we recommend that you hit stop and go start over from there. But if not, go crazy. If you're new to this podcast, hit that subscribe button. And for our returning followers, thank you so much for supporting us. Without further ado, part 3 of the Frank and Ian Godfather trilogy.
So Sonny goes and gets himself killed. He gets shot 1,000 times, and
1,004.
And Don is recovering from getting shot a lot himself. The Godfather is not in the greatest shape, but there's a very powerful scene where he comes down the steps, and his number 2, Tom, his consigliere, is having a drink, and no one's talked to Don about what's happened yet. He doesn't know that Sonny's dead. But Don kind of taps him on the shoulder and says, my wife is crying. There's cars coming and going from the house. You're having a drink. I think it's about time you should tell your Don what everyone else seems to know. And I think hiding information in business, and look, Tom was going to have to tell him at some point, he was just trying to get the courage up. But a lot of times something goes wrong in business. And as a manager or someone new to something, you want to hide it. You want to try to mask it until you can fix it. You hire a manager and they turn out to be a maniac. They're terrible. Or you make a decision to spend a bunch of money in marketing and it turns out to flop. It does nothing for your sales and it blows your budget. There's a tendency to hide from it and not want to talk about it and hope that you can fix it before your boss finds out or someone else sees it. But I think the fallacy in that is that your boss doesn't already know a good bit about it. When people tried to hide things from me, I normally already knew enough about it. It was rare that they were hiding something that I didn't know something about by the time they talked to me. And the longer they waited to tell me, the more irritated I grew. It was almost insulting, like I can't see. Normally you can see it in the numbers turning up, right? You can see it in objective things, but you're also assuming that I don't have other sources than you to tell me, that I don't talk to people under you, that I'm not the part of the reason why I always tried to keep as many relationships as I could on the front lines is they told me things. I got information from people on the front of how they perceived things were going. So just as a general statement, this scene was powerful for me because I've seen so many people try to hide things and assume the boss didn't know what was going on, and they did. And Don handles it very well, where he says, okay, you've had your drink. Now tell your Don what he needs to know, right? I'm ready.
So you and I were talking about this earlier. There was I had a meeting this week with, some counterparts of mine from the Collective Genius. And we're looking to do a new business. And we were trying to bring someone in to run that segment of business. And it was being reported back to me that the conversation hadn't gone well. And I was like, yeah, he's out. And the conversation was like, why? He called you? I'm like, no, I've been doing this for 3 decades. Like, he's out. He's giving us the wrong moves. Like, you can just tell he's out. So you can't bullshit a bullshitter, and you just can't. And sometimes it's best to just own up to it and talk it through. And if you don't, you're going to get called out because the superior is going to know what it is. They're going to sniff it out so fast. It's kind of like, if you make a mistake, just own up to it. And the quicker you do, the better off it's going to be for you. And the whole reason for that is it's going to fester and it's going to just get worse if it doesn't get just brought up. So I want to go in a different direction with this, Ian, if you're cool with it. You and I have talked multiple times about the sunken cost fallacy. You want to explain it real quick?
So sunk cost fallacy is, the mental fallacy in your mind that I've spent money on this, so I have to keep driving forward. So the most simple thing I can think about is when you're in a restaurant and you think you're hungrier than you are. So you order way too much food, but you've spent money on it. And so you shove it down your throat and you finish all of it anyway, even though you know that's not healthy and it's not even serving you whatsoever. So that's an example of the sunk cost fallacy. But a lot of times in a career, it's more about, well, I've spent 3 years learning this company and becoming an expert, so I don't want to leave. I should stay to get some value out of it. Even though you know it's probably time for you to leave, you stick around longer because you've sunk costs into staying there.
What the Don does after learning that his oldest son has been murdered is the opposite of what most people do. Most people hunker down and make the fight worse because they follow the sunken cost fallacy of, I've got to exact revenge, I've got to do something. As soon as Tom Hagen tells him that your son has been murdered, the first thing he goes to is enough. Enough. We are bloody. We are murdered. We are being decimated financially. We're going through all this horse shit. I've lost basically 3 of my sons. One's in Sicily, one's in Vegas, one's dead. Enough. And that's what leadership is. Like in this very moment, he just says, peace will set us free. And he stops all the crap, is emotional, pushes away from the emotion, and decides, I will broker a trade that will end this war. And he's got the biggest bargaining chip. He just lost his son. His son is literally still warm with bullets in him. His wife doesn't even know he's dead yet. And the first thing he goes to is, let's get to peace. And that's what leadership is. Leadership is, let's get to the conclusion fastest.
Yep. Don't keep pushing something because you're already bought in on it. And don't keep going along with a process that is already broken, because the process was broken. They already retaliated when he got shot up. That's what Sonny did. Sonny went and retaliated, killed a bunch of Taglia's guys, and all that brought was more pain to the family. So why don't we just quit this direction and start somewhere new? And that's, I think that's awesome that you tied that to sunk cost fallacy, because it's, I've been a sucker for this over and over and over in my life. And there's a lot of ego tied up in it, right? That's again, Don didn't have an ego. Sonny did have an ego. So he would keep pushing a broken agenda, even though he knew it wasn't working. He doubles down on it because I've already spent so much on it. But if it's not working, it's not working. Just go a different direction.
That's the sunken cost fallacy. I ordered 100 wings. I've eaten 8, but I'll eat the last 92 because damn it, I ordered them. Sonny's going to keep fighting where the Don is like, it's over. It's enough. But that's what leadership is. And that to me, when we were
talking like with Warren Buffett, right? Warren Buffett says if he buys a stock and he got it wrong, just get out. Like if I bought $100,000 worth of a stock and it dropped to 75 and I thought the company kind of sucked, whether I lost 25,000 or not is immaterial if it could go to 50. Don't lose another 25. Don't stack more bad decisions onto the first decision just because you sunk money into it. Call it quits and go find a winner to invest in.
So March of 2020, coronavirus hits. About May, it turns out that Buffett sold all of his airline stock at a massive loss. And the reason is 2 months in, he realized airline travel is fundamentally altered for a very significant period of time. And I would rather take a short-term loss than a grueling long-term loss with who knows what the bottom is. Or right now in a favorable tax environment, it makes more sense to just sell it, take the loss, let that be something that helps me propel forward. And the quicker you can admit defeat, the faster you get around the corner to something better. Like when you looked at it, you're like, all right, shit. I either go to the mattresses or I figure out how to be strategic and smart with these new people coming into my business. And what I do is I get strategic very fast. It was like, hey, we can go get drunk with our buddies or we can go be strategic. And there was a moment like right there. You know what I mean? Like that's where those decisions are made and lost in a lot of instances.
Yeah. And there's So go to the mattresses fits in a little bit when there's a change of control. But there's also a change of control when Michael comes back from Sicily and he becomes the new head of the family. And everyone is going through discomfort, right? Clemenza is saying, "What do we do?" They're trying to go to the Don, right? When the two captains are trying to go to the Don to say we don't agree with Michael, and the Don is saying, "Look, I'm not in charge. Michael's in charge, and if you respect me, you'll respect Michael." And he has to keep pushing him back. But in that scene where Michael is making move after move, he fires Tom, who is like a brother to him and a longtime consigliere. And he's very cold about it. I mean, very cold. And in the book, there's a lot of reasons why they need Tom out, because they're trying to protect him. They don't want him to get killed. But in that situation, so the previous boss is still around. There's a new boss in place. And this could happen to you anytime in your career. So you work for a great manager. He's amazing. He gets promoted to a bigger position. New manager comes in. New manager is going to do what the new manager wants to do. It could mean you're out. It could mean you don't have the same clout that you had before, but it kind of works the same way. So in this scene, the Don comes over, talks to Tom, who's just been fired. He's out. And in a very cold fashion, in a public fashion. And the Don puts his arm around him and he tries to comfort Tom. He says, "Hey, look, you're great. You were an amazing consigliere. My son was a bad Don. You were not a bad consigliere. This is a change that Michael's making, and you still have an important role." But Michael's like, "Tom, you're out. Get out." Like, it's real cold. And that is exactly how it happens often when a manager is hired from outside the company into your company. Is the people who brought the new management in may still be warm and friendly with you, but you better find a way to work with the new manager because they're in control now. And not working for that new manager only insults your previous manager that brought them in. And so the Don keeps saying, if you guys love me, you're going to respect Michael. And it's the same way in business.
Very, very, very much so. And like an example of this is most people always look for new. They don't look behind you to see what has happened already. People in business are not nostalgic. Your mother is nostalgic. People in business are all about what's in front of us and who's going to get us there. Like a lot of the shit that happens that's new in business has often already been done, but it was just by an older voice that is being replaced by someone new. And it's a wave that kind of pushes forward. And if you're not on the wave is going to wipe your ass out. And I've seen it many, many, many times in business. And I mean, Ian and I are both in our middle 40s now. Like we might have a couple of we're both in positions where we're probably not going to get wiped out because we own businesses, but you got to think about that. Like, where are you in the path of the wave? And you need to be ahead of it because the wave is coming no matter who you are. And you just got to be prepared for it.
So this is a sidebar, but a character that Frank and I find amusing. There's a character in the movie named Moe Greene, and Moe runs Vegas operations, which is still a fledgling operation. It obviously became a much bigger operation for the mafia, but it's still fledgling at the time. And Moe Greene does everything wrong from a negotiation perspective, everything wrong. We laughed a little bit about it, but like a lot of the other characters who show their cards way too much, and it's interesting that Moe Greene's the Vegas guy, but Moe is the easiest dude to read in the entire movie. And so Michael's out there. Michael wants to buy out Moe Greene's investment in the casino. They want to buy the casino out themselves. And Michael states very calmly that's what he's here to do. All business, focused on it. And Greene just loses his mind. Moe Greene just, his immediate, he doesn't let it sink in. Now it's surprising, and this is going to happen to you in your career where someone gives you information that you don't like, that is shocking, that is detrimental to your career, to you. And the way to approach it is the opposite of Moe Greene. So Michael says, we're here to buy you out. And Moe Greene starts cursing at him and says, buy me out? I'll buy you out. And Michael stays calm and kind of listens and keeps talking. But then Moe keeps getting worse. Moe shows his cards. He says, I've been talking to Barsini, who's a big competitor, right? And that would be a major piece of information that Michael wanted to get. Michael needed that information, and he gives it up within about 4 seconds.
He also throws in a zinger of, I was making my bones when you were going out with cheerleaders, which really isn't anything in the negotiation, but it's funny.
And it also comes back to Waltz's downside, ego, right? Do you know who I am? I'm Moe Greene, right? And that the ego gets in the way, but also the emotions, the fire, the right approach would have been Moe saying, really, why is it that you want to buy me out? He asks no questions. All he does is argue. And all he does is give information that helps Michael, figure out exactly what he's going to have to do with Moe. If Moe would have been smart, he would have asked why it was happening, asked a whole bunch of open-ended questions, gleaned information, not shared anything, kept his chips close, then went and called Barsini and said, here's what they're up to. But he didn't. Right. He didn't. He just started yelling and saying, I'm working with Barsini. And by the end of the meeting, Michael had all the information he needed to know, which is I pretty much have to kill Moe Greene.
And Barzini, who both get whacked at the end.
Got to kill them both.
Because, right? Exactly. We can go deeper into this, but it's kind of an aside, and it's kind of a caricature of what you don't want to be. You don't want to be the guy, and we talked about this. He's kind of all the worst things all rolled up in the Vegas Strip. He's emotional. He's short-sighted. He's slapping Fredo in the face. He's doing all of these other things that he should not be doing. And then when it comes down to negotiating, he's brash and arrogant, and he's got a knife at a gunfight. And ultimately, he's on a table getting a massage and the bullet goes through the back of his brain. It's like it's a really interesting summation of the side you don't want to be on in a mob movie or in business.
So Michael is trying to figure out exactly what his move is going to be. He now knows that his time is limited. He knows that they're going to come after him. He knows that the families don't have respect and they're going to test him.
Let's set this up a little bit. Moe Greene, because he said Barzini, they know that Barzini wants to do the same thing Michael wants to do. And he knows that Moe Greene's in bed with him. So what happens is Tom gets pushed out because the old man was a better consigliere to Michael, because they were going to war, but they wanted to be a Patriot missile strike. They did not want to go into a big war. And they knew what was coming because there was a lot at stake here. So go ahead, Ian, pick that back up.
Yeah. So Michael is now talking to his father. And I think, one of my favorite scenes in the movie really is the Don is on his last legs. He knows he's not terribly healthy. He's in a place in his life where he cares more about his garden than he does about the family business. But this is where it is important to have advisors that have been through some wars, that have been through some recessions, that have scars. At this point, the Godfather's in his 80s. He's got 60 some years of mafia work under his belt, and Michael
got a strong resume.
Yeah, he's got a good resume. Michael is now in a tough situation, and he would be a fool not to listen to what his father has to say. And so, the Godfather tells him they're going to come after you. They're going to try to set a meeting and tell you it's safe. And whoever comes to you with this meeting is the traitor. Whoever comes to you and says they're going to set a meeting with Barzini to have peace, it's going to be an assassination. But whoever of your people, it's going to be someone that you trust, is going to come to you, is going to be kind of, is going to be the person who sets you up. And ultimately, the Godfather dies, and at his funeral, one of Michael's lieutenants comes up to him and asks him if he wants to have a meeting. And that little bit of intel is what helps Michael set up, the big bloody 3-minute ending of, guns blaring and Michael taking control of everything. And, to me, I've been blessed with some very good mentors, and some of my favorite mentors have been through multiple recessions. I can remember I was a year out of college when the tech bubble blew up. I didn't know anything. I was just like, everyone's like, oh, it's a recession. And I didn't know anything. So I didn't really care. And I was selling. So I'm like, well, my job was hard before this. It's still hard. So no big deal. But I remember at MVR when we went through the big housing downturn, just how fun it was to watch Bill Inman work, because he had been through the S&L crisis. He sat through all the bankruptcy meetings. He had seen entire mortgage companies come and go. And, it was fascinating for me to watch, to watch someone who had been through so many recessions go through. And he told me everything that was going to happen in the financial crisis before it happened. And there were some things he said where I was like, no way, that's fantasy. That's not going to happen. But the majority of everything that happened, it came through, and it really taught me a lesson, Frank, about who you listen to and the importance of experience in your mentors. If you're going to listen to a coach, the importance of someone who's been through some tough stuff, that you should shut up and listen to them when things are about to get hard again.
This is fascinating television, but I'm going to grab something real quick. Just a second. This is a book that won many, many, many awards. It's on the shelf in my office at home, and Ian and I have both read it. It's I don't know if it won a Pulitzer, but it's an incredible book, and it's called This Time is Different. And the title to it is 8 Centuries of Fiscal Folly. And Ian and I have both read this book like a Bible, a business Bible. And what it tells you is history repeats itself over and over and over. And the wise sage Don had been through 3 other wars that the book goes into much more than the movie. And he knew there was a new territory to be fought for. The territory of drugs it's a real business. But many of the families wanted to avoid drugs, but the casinos was the future. And it was hotly contested turf. And because it was hotly contested, there would be people inside of the business who were looking to move up that could be lured away, just like in regular businesses. And not only that, they would do something to show their hand and tip. And that was what was going to clue Michael in. And what Ian and I love, Ian and I both love Buffett, but we also love Charlie Munger, because nobody delivers an incredible point with more of a cantankerous attitude than Charlie Munger. And it's because he's got an incredibly good memory from 75 years in business, because he's seen it over and over.
Yeah, it's so that the Don's information ends up saving Michael's life, even after the Don is dead and gone. That advice helped out. And so, I think just if you have a chance to have a mentor that's been through something tough, that's been through something hard, you want to do everything to cultivate that relationship and stay as close as you can, because a lot of times you just don't know what you don't know. And especially when you're young, you think this time it'll be different. You don't understand. I'm closer to it. It's a different market. It's a different generation. All of that's actually garbage. Things just keep repeating itself. And Frank, there's a great line in the movie where they say, every 10 years or so, this happens. We got to have a war to kind of get all the bad blood out. And that's largely the way markets work. Just about every decade, there's a recession, right? Every 15, 20 years, there's a bad one, a really bloody one. And if things have been good too long, that's when you should start being a little bit cautious that there's going to be some type of a clear out at some point.
One of our favorite lines, right? When everybody is greedy, be fearful. When everybody is fearful, be greedy. And it's the truth. There's a few things here that are kind of non-sequential that I kind of want to talk about. I think the fun thing is that when the trader comes in, the guy who was on Taxi, and I think his name's Telly something or another, but he comes in and he goes, "Tom, can you get me off the hook for old time's sake?" And that's not how it works. Like, he's trying to pull at the emotional strings, but when you're young, when I was young, I was optimistic. Like, you think that Michael Jordan playing for the Wizards is going to be Michael Jordan dunking from the free throw line.
Yeah.
Those days were over.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you realize that, but you want to see it. Like, you want to see Mike Tyson knock the shit out of Spinks, but that Mike Tyson is gone.
Yeah.
And what you start to realize in business is if you don't realize that, you do get replaced. And it's kind of a harsh reality, but it's reality. We talked to the analogy of the wave. There's a new wave coming, and you want to ride as many of them as you can, but you also don't want to get wiped out by it.
So Tessio's trying to play to the heartstrings. So Tessio is the one who was the traitor. So
Yep.
he tried to sell out the Don. He went behind his back, and that's about as bad a thing as you can possibly do, obviously. I've had situations where someone has, you've had a breach of integrity, right? You've had someone sign for a customer or initial or outright lie that put the company at risk. I've had people use company email for some dirty, bad things, and, our software caught it, and it's kind of shocking. And I've had to fire them. And I've sat in rooms with people that have worked with me for years, and they've begged for their job. And at that point, there is no sentiment. There's black and white. Just like Tessio sold out the Don, there was no getting him off. At that point, you knew where Tessio was about to end up. It's the same in business. If you're going to cross a line, you're not going to be able to beg for your job, no matter what kind of a relationship you think you have with the person who is there to tell you you're gone.
We talked about this before. My mom's a school teacher, and I'm raised to be someone who has a heart. And in 2006, what I realized was if I didn't fire a bunch of people, someone would come and fire me because I wouldn't be performing. And if I didn't replace those people with better people, my job would be in jeopardy. We talk about Bill Belichick a lot. He cuts people all the time. He's fucking ruthless. And he's always early instead of being late. Because in the end, you got to stay ahead. You have to win, or your opportunity goes away.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll just say on Tessio is and I think you're the same as me, there are a lot of things that I can look past as a manager. I can watch you perform poorly for a while. You can maybe have a bit of an attitude, a little bit too much arrogance. And if you get results, and I can kind of work to coach you, you can not be as fast as everyone else. You can be maybe a mid-level producer for a long time, and there's still value in that if you're a good teammate. You can be someone who makes mistakes, or you're unorganized. One thing I just can never, ever look past is a breach of loyalty. Just if you went and said something behind the back, if you tried to play politics in a way that helped you and hurt other people, if you breached my trust, if you lied to me, that's just not something that I can recover from. And it's not something that you'll be able to recover from.
I mean, we've used this before on this podcast. It's Warren Buffett at Salomon Brothers. If you do something where we lose an ounce of integrity, I'm going to be ruthless. And that is, like, for me, I'll overlook a ton, but if it's morally and ethically wrong, and it's not in the gray zone, it's wrong. It's like you swing a hammer and you swing it fast. And that's what that was. Like, Tessio could never, ever, ever be trusted again. And because of that, you're better off killing the person in the mafia movies or firing them in your business. Because what ends up happening with someone like Tessio is, if you give them a second chance, they hurt you worse. Like my dad.
What message does it send to the rest of your organization if you
Right.
let Tessio stay? Now you're saying, look, don't ever breach my trust but once. I'll give all of you one chance. Everyone now thinks there's no ramifications if you do that. With things like integrity, I think it's really important. And I used to say this all the time at meetings in front of people. There's just no second chances. I want to make it clear. There's no second chances on doing the right thing. And let me define some of the things that you can never do, or I will find someone to replace you. There's just no question. You do it once and you're gone. And then when it happens, even if it's someone you love, even if it's someone that you care so much about and that you have a good relationship with, you have to say goodbye to them on the spot. You just have to. There is no old time's sake.
My dad has an incredible saying: screw me once, shame on you. Screw me twice, shame on me.
Yep.
So let's do this, Ian. There's a couple fun things to talk about, right? This doesn't really fit with any of the themes, but there's a few things that I think are worth talking about. The Don in his garden is about to die. And he says to Michael, I spent my time trying not to be careless. Men cannot be careless. I thought that was an incredible line. Careless can probably be substituted for a different word in a non-underworld mob type of a world. But in the careless thing, like when you hear him say that, what do you think?
I thought about my father-in-law, and I thought about the burden of a business owner. People come and go in your organization, and they all have ideas, and they all have strong feelings about things that you should be doing to change, money you should be spending in places, business lines you should be getting into, new markets you should be entering, people that should be coming and going. But none of them have the burden that an owner has. And I feel that burden every time I talk with Ted, my father-in-law. He's got 20 some employees, and he feels very responsible to make decisions that keep all of them employed and that do things well. And that means he says no on a regular basis, and it can frustrate people that work for him, that he's kind of created a box that he knows works, and he has to frustrate some people in not changing because he can't be careless. He's not such a big organization that he can just spend anywhere or get into every line of work. That line made me think of Ted, my father-in-law.
So Tessio and having to fire him, it comes back to that for me. Like, if I have someone who makes moral and ethical errors, not only am I at risk if I keep them, but so are the careers of all of the people who've entrusted me as a business owner with their careers and their family's livelihood. And that is a heavy, heavy responsibility and burden. And it's one that I take a great deal of pride in executing, but I also take very seriously that these people have not just said yes to a job, they have entrusted me with their careers. And that's to me what that line, like in its most meaningful, that's what it is. So if you're embarking upon a career and you're going to start hiring people, you have to think of it that way. You are doing a disservice of anyone you hire if you can't look them in the eye and say, you are better saddling up with me. And it's one of the things you and I've talked about of my employees are so much better now than they were 5 years ago. My business is more stable. I can pay more. I can do so many different things. But that to me was a line that we couldn't miss. That kind of sets this movie, to me, the way it ends. So I'm sure you've seen it. Basically everybody gets killed, inclusive of Connie's husband. And Michael, the Connie's his sister, and he kills his brother-in-law and her husband. And all he can say is, she's hysterical. She's hysterical, which my dad and I both love. It's so fucking heartless. He's just become godfather to her kid. She's got a couple of kids at this point, and it's just heartless. And it's so detached from reality. And you realize this war hero is now a monster in the arc of a couple of hours. And he's embraced this new life, which I don't know if there's a business parallel, but I just thought that part was incredible.
Well, I think that there is a point that you can get to with power, where we've talked a lot about the arc of personal and business. And I think there is a point with power where you feel like you're above everything and you detach yourself so emotionally that you can lose part of who you are if you let power get to your head. I've certainly been in big positions, executive positions, where it's easy to start buying into, everywhere you go, everyone's nervous and excited that the boss is in town and they want everything to be just right, from who picks you up at the airport to where we're eating lunch and dinner, and everyone's desk is cleaned off when you get there. And it is really easy to kind of buy into some of those, some of that power, and to lose some of your humility, and lose who you are. Ultimately, the story of the Godfather and Michael's arc, he loses who he is as a person. He was a good person who became infatuated with power and nervous and always stressed and anxious, and he loses a lot of that in the whole trilogy. So I think that can easily happen to you in a career as well, especially if you have a career that does well and one that affords you some level of authority and power.
Yep.
That's my take on that.
Yes. The morally corrupt side is unarguable or inarguable. The other thing I think was fascinating about the way the movie ends is it's really Michael's business now. The Don is dead. He does a bunch of shit because the Don is dead that he probably couldn't have done or wouldn't have done with him alive. And the regime change is official. And the movie's title is The Godfather. He's becoming Godfather. And simultaneously, he shoots and kills a cop. He shoots and kills his brother-in-law several hours after. He shoots and kills Moe Greene, and he shoots and kills his rival who wants to get into the same business. And that is a regime change. And although despicable in actions, the thing that's to be admired about it and the business lesson you learn is when you do take over, you set the table so you can win. And he just set the table so he can win. Now, in an ethically depraved way, but he set the table so he can win. And he's building his legacy on this new foundation. And that's how the movie ends. And then there's 2 more movies after it where that foundation gets bigger and then it eventually crumbles. But the whole entire thing is framed there. My dad's business is no longer my business. I've got my new foundation.
And I think the only thing I'll add to that, I think that's well done, is I've rarely taken over a business or an office and kept all of the managers as was. Because normally when I've been asked to take over a business or an office or consult or advise, people are not doing that because things are running really well. And so if you want me to run it and you want it run the way I run things, I'm going to bring in my kind of people to do it. And so I'm rarely taking something over where I'm not replacing a good chunk of the cohort of managers who are already there.
So I'll tell a kind of a funny aside to this, right? I'll do an analogy. Most managers leave and they think their team is perfect. They think their team is perfect. Most new managers come in and think the team is terrible. Have you ever either gotten your car fixed? Like before, like you and I probably take our car to a dealership now. But when we didn't have any money, I'd always take my car to like just a shitty mechanic. or I take my my laptop to an IT guy.
Yeah.
Like, what was the one thing the IT guy or the mechanic always made you think?
When you go to get your oil change?
No matter what you would do with a mechanic, the only thing I ever felt certain of is what he was going to tell me is the last guy that touched this car was an idiot. Like that was the one takeaway, right? Like whoever did this was a moron. I'm going to fix it, but that guy's a moron.
Every new president does this. They blame the last guy as long as they possibly can, until they get some results going their way.
That's it. So if you're ever in a position where you are a new manager, you don't have the luxury to shoot everybody and start over. It just isn't that way. So what you do is systematically in the business world or in your own business, you look at what are the pieces that work, what are the pieces that don't. You prioritize the decision making. You find the people who are terrible and morally and ethically wrong and get rid of them. You find the people who are decent, you put them on performance plans and you push them along. And you find the people who are great and you champion them. And then together you establish a new set of goals and desires and directives and you push forward. Michaels was leaving New York and going to Las Vegas and getting into the casino business. Ian and I have started collectively 5 or 8 businesses. It's always the same recipe. Sometimes you wish you could murder. You can't. But you clean the slate, you start over, you take what you can, you pull it along. And that to me is what the end of that movie looked like. But that's how it's applicable to business.
Yeah, you make it uniquely yours. At some point, you have to put your stamp on it. You don't do it right away. I think Michael did it the right way. He kind of listened. He paid attention. He was deferential to his dad for the most part. But then at some point, here's the changes I'm making in the organization. Here's the new market we're going into. Here's the attack we're making on our competition. And it's going to work or it's not going to work. But one thing I'm certain of, it's going to be mine.
And there's one other thing I think I'll draw in a parallel and then wrap this thing up. He was deferential to his dad until his dad died. And when his dad died, he'd done the work, he'd listened, he'd done the things. He was ready to fly the coop and fly the nest because he'd done all the work. And the nice thing is he had an incredible person behind him to learn from. You often see people who want to go too fast. And what happens in some instances is you go too fast, you fail in that next job, and then you get pushed back. You don't go back to where you came from. Usually you have to take several rungs back further. Watch this with coaches. You see NFL coaches who are incredible. They're incredible coordinators. They become coaches, and then they get fired, and they don't go back to coordinator. They're quarterback coach or offensive line coach because they went too far. And that's the thing that Michael did well, is he really embraced, I've got this incredible guy to learn from, and I'm going to do incremental things until the time is right. The other thing he does, and it's in Godfather 2, is he kills Fredo. And when he kills Fredo, his mother had just died. Like, he won't kill his brother until his mother is gone. But as soon as his dad is gone, he makes changes to go to one level. As soon as his mom is gone, these are people that he respected. He does something else. But it's again, we don't want to condone murder. It's dominoes. This domino falls, this is the move. The second big domino falls, this is the next move.
Yep. Well, I have exhausted all of my thoughts of business on The Godfather. And I think more than anything, I'm excited that I learned how to do a sepia background filter to make this look like the grainy Godfather filmmaking of the 70s. This looks like Coppola put together the podcast today, which is pretty exciting.
It is. If you look at the scene where the Don dies, they're filming it. It's 1971 or 72 and they're filming it. And there's like traffic driving in and out of New York City. It's just a split second, top of the screen, you only catch on your like 103rd viewing. And like what was fascinating to me in seeing that, it's like these people are driving to work, sitting in traffic. And that was a world that The Godfather did not exist. Thankfully, and for you and me, The Godfather has existed our entire life.
And we put more work into preparing for this podcast than Marlon Brando did in his award-winning is probably his most famous movie, and he did zero prep for it. Just rolled up and read cards the whole time. So we prepped a little more than Marlon did.
I think he'll be remembered more for the role than us.
Yep. That's right, man. That's right. Well, I'm looking forward to editing this one, big guy. It was good to see you. You look dapper in that Italian suit. I hope I looked Italian enough for you.
Ian, let's make them an offer they can't refuse.
Let's do it, brother. See you, man.
Good talking to you.
Thank you for listening to our trilogy on business lessons of The Godfather. We hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it. We had an absolute blast making this episode for everyone. Hey, if you liked it, leave us some comments and a 5-star review, and let us know if you want us to do another movie series or music, anything. We're open to new ideas. We're a fledgling startup, so all of your support means a lot to us. Thank you so much.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.